I never imagined that my 30th birthday would shatter my entire identity. Turning 30 is always discussed as if it were some significant event, a time for introspection, and perhaps a small sense of accomplishment at one's own progress. But that day, I felt like someone had ripped out all my beliefs about myself. Dinner was the first event. It was a simple, home-cooked meal. My mom had demanded that she prepare a special meal for me. Restaurants didn't appeal to her. She would always complain that it was too loud and impersonal. To be honest, I also didn't want a giant party. I desired a tranquil evening spent at home. She used to prepare that warm apple crumble every year when I was a child, and I thought maybe she would cook my favorite dish, her chicken pot pie. However, the table was hardly arranged when I entered. There was no cake on the table, no presents. There was not a single embellishment in sight. Alan, my stepfather, was watching a game while lounging on the couch. Despite everything, my younger brother Ryan remained glued to his phone. "Hey," I murmured quietly. Nobody answered. On my birthday, I felt like a ghost as I stood there in my mother's house. I thought they were just tired, even though they'd been cold to me before. They're occupied. Avoid overanalyzing it. As my mother reheated a frozen lasagna in the oven, I took a seat at the corner of the table. She didn't create anything herself. I didn't give a damn about the candle, card, or any other sign she remembered from today. I felt like I was vanishing as I approached my 30th birthday. Still hopeful, I stayed to help with the dishes after dinner. Perhaps she had a strategy. The moment might have been merely a prelude. However, nothing appeared. She said this just as I was about to leave. She wiped her hands on a dish towel and mumbled, "I guess now's as good a time as any. You are 30 years old. You're mature enough to understand the reality." I pivoted. "What is the truth?" She spoke without glancing at me. "You are not mine. This is not true in a biological sense. We adopted you when you were 3 months old. It doesn't really matter anymore, does it? We weren't planning on sharing this information with you." I was having trouble breathing. The room whirled. The air was heavy and dense. "What?" I hardly spoke above a whisper. "I assumed you were aware." Or, she said fairly casually, suspicious. "In any case, you never quite fit in. I never quite fit in." The truth itself wasn't as powerful as their words. The memories flashed back, including being excluded from family holidays, her icy embraces, and the way Mom treated Ryan as though he were the son, and I was nothing more than a tolerable object. Years had passed while I tried to convince myself that it was all in my head. However, I wasn't. Ryan smirked as he briefly raised his head from his phone. I suddenly understood something far more sinister than the reality of my birth. They never wanted me to know because I was never supposed to stay. I was helpful. I was easy to use and provided assistance. The kid serves as a temporary substitute until the arrival of the real one. Numb, I stood there. My thoughts were clouded by anger, anguish, and incredulity. "Why now?" I inquired. "Why are you informing me now?" She gave a shrug. "You are becoming overly inquisitive. Your inquiries about the will and the house were particularly bothersome. I simply decided it would be best to be honest. What about the will?" The last component came together at that point. They made alterations. It didn't include me. She was being so aloof because of this. She no longer needed to pretend. She had removed me from the family itself, not just from the meals and trips. Despite the ache behind my eyes, I refrained from crying. I refrained from crying in their presence. "No more." "I see," I remarked in a chilly tone. His calm demeanor was unusual for someone whose entire world had just crumbled, and something started to change inside of me in that silence. I didn't feel the need to plead, justify, or establish my value for the first time in years. All I wanted to do was leave. However, they were unaware of my next course of action. I had trouble sleeping that night. I listened to her voice repeatedly as I lay in bed and stared at the ceiling. "We adopted you when you were 3 months old. In any case, you never quite fit in." That little distinction was something I had always sensed. It wasn't as noisy as in the movies where stepmothers lock their children in the attic or hiss insults. No, it wasn't that loud. When I received consecutive as, she remained silent. She never framed any of my school photos. She used to remark, "Ryan is such a natural whenever he accomplished something mediocre," while I put in twice as much effort and received half the credit. As a child, I believed that if I was good enough, intelligent enough, or useful enough, she might not look at me the same way she did at him. Without Ryan reminding her, perhaps my mother would remember to call me on my birthday, pack my lunch, and give me a hug. However, I now understand that I was never truly hers, not in the important manner. I began to reflect. I was recalling things that I had not previously allowed myself to think about. For example, I heard her talking to a buddy on the phone when I was 13. Well, you know how it is when they're not really yours, she said, chuckling. It's not the same. Despite your best efforts, you never truly forget. I assumed she was referring to me. However, I had persuaded myself that she was referring to the dog, or the child of a neighbor. The child could be anyone other than myself, or how my mother didn't chastise Ryan for breaking my favorite cup, which my biological aunt had given me when I was a child. It was just a cup, she remarked. What's causing your sensitivity? That mug was mine. It was the only thing I knew about my origins. Something inside of me also broke when I learned this. I cried in my room for hours on end, but I never told her. I kept it to myself. There were a lot of such items, moments that I had carefully folded and stored in mental drawers labeled, "You're overreacting and not relevant." But suddenly they were spilling open one by one. I tried to act as though none of those memories or those tiny stinging cuts hurt. Beneath everything, a question was sprouting like a weed. Who was I? What did it make me if she wasn't actually my mother? A mere stand-in? A project for foster care? Could it be an experiment conducted on a real child? Why didn't she love me too? I had shaped myself in ways that I believed would appeal to her. She claimed that art was a hobby rather than a job, so I chose to study accounting. She claimed it was selfish of me to move away, so I stayed near home. I brought Ryan up from parties, looked after her operation, and gave them money when Alan lost his job, even though I was barely able to buy groceries. I thought I was being a good daughter all along. Perhaps, though, I was merely practical, short-term, throw it away. After that, there was a will. She had asked me to sign a document for insurance a few months prior, and I recalled that moment. She was evasive, distracted. I refrained from pressing. As usual, I trusted her and quickly signed. Did she eliminate me at that point? My gut twisted at the thought. I stared at old pictures of school performances, Christmas mornings, and birthdays for the remainder of the night. Ryan took center stage in every photo, grinning, joyful. My mother put her arm around him. My father, or I suppose my stepfather, was grinning, and there I was, constantly in the background. I maintained a constant half smile. I always make an effort to smile. I can't recall ever being in the center. I didn't give her a call the following morning. I didn't respond to Ryan's messages. Alone, I sat in my apartment and gazed at everything I had created for myself. The food in the refrigerator, the furnishings, and the rent were all mine. Mine alone. I found myself isolated. In that instant, I realized that I had given love to people for 30 years, but they never really returned the favor. What is the most depressing aspect? I had agreed to it. I had persuaded myself that crumbs would suffice. I convinced myself that it didn't matter if the birthday dinner was cold. The proximity to love made it tolerable. However, I was no longer a child. The truth, no matter how awful, had broken something inside of me. Perhaps I should cease requesting a place at their table. Perhaps it was time for me to construct my own. I almost recognized my voice as I whispered to myself, I've been quiet my entire life. However, I will not be silent any longer. I didn't pick up the phone for the next week. There was no conflict, no dramatic outburst. There was only silence. It spoke louder than I ever could. My mother left 3 voicemails. The first sounded informal, as if nothing had occurred. I just wanted to check in, sweetie. I hope you like the cake. I hope you enjoyed the cake. Would you like me to freeze a slice for you, as Ryan mentioned that you did not take any home? The second was sharper. You need to quit behaving like a child. I'm not sure what's gotten into you. Our best effort was made. You know, life isn't always fair. And the third one there was no message left by her. I did, however, save them all. This was not out of sentimentality. but rather as evidence proof of how she shifted blame, avoided responsibility, and twisted the facts. That was always the case. I was no longer angry. I was past that. I could feel the coldness now. Sharper. Clarity. I began to distance myself from all the ties that bound me to that life. I didn't respond to the talk in the family group. I didn't have dinner on Sunday. I called off our brunch date with Ryan's fiancée, a girl I once assisted with college essays and job interviews. I owed her nothing at this point. None of them owed me anything. This time, I declined. Silently, firmly. They took note. Ryan texted, "How are you? Mom is concerned." She told me that I wasn't her daughter, and I wanted to reply, she wasn't worried. But I didn't. I simply let it read. My retaliation was silence. However, beneath that silence, a longing to comprehend was stirring. I couldn't resist the urge to discover what else remained hidden from me. I searched for my birth certificates. I had never been inquisitive. I had devoted my entire life to proving my belonging, not because I wasn't interested, that I didn't require additional roots. I wasn't so sure now, though. After 3 separate inquiries and hours of waiting, someone at the county office eventually handed a packet over the desk to me. There were some yellowed papers within, which were brittle around the edges. The woman I had called Mom for 30 years was not one of the 2 names on my birth certificate. I experienced a sense of depletion in that moment. I wasn't upset. I wasn't shocked. To put it simply, I felt empty. A handwritten letter from when I was 3 months old was also present, from my mother by birth. The letter stated that she had placed me for adoption because she was in severe financial need. However, there was no resentment, just heartache. In her letter, Mom expressed her desire that I would grow up in a caring household and that she hoped I would be intelligent, content, and whole when I grew up. "One day, I hope you'll forgive me," she wrote. "Know that I wanted to give you more than I could." I clutched that letter like it was oxygen while I sobbed in my car. I felt something soft for the first time in days. It was not from the mother who raised me. However, the mother who gave birth to me and lovingly let me go is the source of my inspiration. In that instant, I came to a significant realization. Biology is not love. However, biology does not justify the lack of love. My adoptive mother chose me. She welcomed me into her life and home. At some point, she believed that was enough. She believed that the provision of food and clothing was sufficient, that she was not required to love me in the same manner that she adored Ryan. However, I was a kid. And kids, take note, children remember things. And now, I had matured. I remembered everything clearly. I honestly didn't want retribution. I would rather not yell, cause her to cry, or damage relationships. I desired separation, limitations, calm. To legally obtain the adoption documents, I began the process. I updated my emergency contact information. On my medical forms, I updated the emergency contact's name. I even created a brand new savings account that was exclusive to myself. It was like assembling fragments of myself that I was unaware were missing. And I kept my actions a secret from her the entire time. She still believed that I was pouting. I wasn't pouting, though. I was getting ready. I was changing. I was becoming whole. I did not pack everything at once. I started with small items, such as a suitcase here and a drawer there. I put clothes in donation bags that I hadn't worn in years. Do I have albums of family photos? I put them in the cabinet at the bottom. They weren't what I wanted. No more. I saw those pictures in a different light, recalling how I was constantly on the edge and how many times I had to ask to be in them. Never centered. I was overly sensitive, they remarked. Perhaps, however, I had every right to be overly sensitive. I also turned in my notice at work. It was a profession my mother had forced me into years ago, not because I didn't enjoy it. It was a steady job, secure, anticipated. It never seemed like mine, even though it paid well. She once told me, "I just think you're wasting your degree. You're not a creative person." It's only a phase. Perhaps she was correct. I wasn't a creative person. Now that I was an adult, I was at last acknowledging that I had the freedom to make alternative decisions. I emailed my supervisor in a kind and professional manner. I did not mention my family. I had no obligation to provide an explanation. Thereafter, I took a week off and traveled 3 hours outside of the city to a lakeside cabin rental. I had to take a breath. I required silence. The only company I had was the trees and a journal I hadn't written in years. I didn't make any social media posts. I kept my destination a secret from everyone. The texts began at that point. "You're where? According to your brother, you haven't responded to anyone in a week. Have I said something that has angered you? That's not how I meant it. It was merely a joke. Return home. You're behaving like a queen of drama." Something clicked inside of me when I read those words repeatedly while staring at the screen. She had no regrets. She felt irritated. I had broken the pattern. She was uncomfortable because of me. The silent me was the one she missed. "Thank you for the backhanded compliments," stated the version. The person who, despite being forgotten, arrived smiling and carrying a birthday cake. However, I was no longer her good daughter. She couldn't use tradition or shame to dominate me as her daughter. I wrote the following at the top of a blank page in bold ink back in the cabin. "I'm not who they claim to be." I meant it too. I signed onto the family shared banking portal the following day. My mother had put my name on a few accounts years ago, just in case something went wrong. According to her, it had to do with responsibility and trust. I now understand, however, that it was about access, command, watching. The first, therefore, took all of my money out of all of the accounts, including the cents I had donated. Silently, methodically. I moved it to a different bank in my name alone. At first, nobody noticed. However, that wouldn't endure. It felt like I had entered a new world when I returned home 3 days later. Too many memories, too many echoes of phone conversations and arguments, and the way I used to wince whenever I saw my mother's name spoken made the air in my flat feel heavier. I decided as a result. When she knocked on the door, I didn't answer. I didn't respond to the messages that my brother sent. I began searching for rental properties in a more tranquil area outside of the city. My name was unknown somewhere. I understood that a week could not undo 30 years of suffering. I could stop adding to it, though. Even yet, I could sense that they were beginning to sense it. My brother attempted to make a call using a different number. In a lengthy email, my mother discussed how families tend to stick together. She mentioned Christmas, customs, and my unfairness. She never apologized once. I learned everything from that. So I continued to walk in quiet. I began recording everything, including emails, texts, and even recollections of past interactions. It felt like claiming the truth, even though I wasn't sure if I would need it. And I realized this one night, while I was lying in bed and listening to the hum of the city outside. I wasn't afraid of being by myself for the first time in my adult life, so I wasn't really alone. I had it myself. And that was just the start. Initially, I had no intention of confronting them. I had nothing spectacular planned. I had no plans for yelling matches, tears, or a major showdown. I had never been like that. However, I became certain when I learned that there would be a family get-together to celebrate my brother's promotion from my cousin, who was unaware that I had broken off communication. The time had come. I went to avoid drawing attention to myself. I want to emphasize that I went. Everything seemed to have shrunk with the weight of memories the moment I entered the house. Everything remained, including the chipped blue mug she still used every morning, the photos on the walls, and the scent of her perfume. And they were all there. There is background music, laughter, and the passing of plates of food. Smug in his new fitted blazer, my brother stood in the middle. When I walked in, my mother looked up. "Oh," she said, not hello. "You didn't make it." Simply, "Oh." I only needed to hear that. I said, "Hello, everyone. Be calm. Even." My voice remained steady. A pause occurred. Uncomfortable. No one knew how much had changed, but everyone knew it had. After putting down a folder I had been carrying under my arm, I approached the coffee table and turned to face my mother. "I must speak with you, right now." There was silence in the room. My brother rolled his eyes. "Would it be possible to wait? It's my day." "It's been your entire life," I murmured, turning to face him and meeting his eyes. Thereafter, he remained silent. I didn't lead her into a different room. No, I wasn't hiding this portion after everything that had been done behind my back and in whispers. No more. She pretended to grin while twitching a little on the armchair's edge. "I've been silent," I said, "for 30 years. Even though I didn't feel like your daughter, I was still polite, helpful, and obedient because deep down, I believed that perhaps if I loved you enough, I would one day be enough. I opened the folder. You made it obvious that I wasn't. Additionally, you stated this in legal documents, despite your inability to do so in person. I took out a printed copy of her most current will, which, based on the documents I had asked the county office for, she had filed last year. It didn't have my name on it. I am not acting as a recipient. I don't consider myself a daughter anyway. He was left everything, including every possession, relic, and remnant of heritage. My mom's expression fell. For the first time in his life, my brother appeared to be in a panic. Where did you purchase that? Her voice was tight as she asked the question. Public record, I said. I had every right to verify. But there's one thing you forgot. On the previous financial accounts, you never took me out of the power of attorney. The ones connected to Grandma's property. Do you know what happened? I've already transferred what's mine. My cousin let out a gasp. My aunt reclined as if she were witnessing a dramatic event. It was dramatic. However, it was my life. My mom opened her mouth to speak, but I interrupted her. When I asked for answers on my birthday, you called me theatrical. You said I should be appreciative that you reared me. It implies I was a burden instead of being cherished. Her mouth opened once more. I extended a hand. No. You can't go back and change it now. My purpose is not to argue. I've come to let you know that I understand. I've had enough of being a fool. I didn't speak loudly. However, it was successful. For the first time, I noticed terror behind her eyes, something I had never seen before. My sibling sneered. Now what? Will you sue us? Are you upset about missing out on some money? I turned and grinned at him. I'm not suing you, sorry. I'm going to let you go. He blinked. What? I'm letting go of the idea that I still require this family to feel complete. Quiet. Nobody made a move. After gathering the papers and placing them back in the folder, I got up. I didn't leave all at once. I did not slam the door. Slowly, deliberately, I moved past the picture wall, down the hallway where, as a teenager, I once sobbed myself to sleep, and out into the cool evening air. It seemed like an eternity had gone by when the door snapped shut behind me. I came to the strong realization that I no longer needed to prove anything. This included proving my value, my devotion, and even my affection. I had completed my task. And now? I used to replace their gap with silence, but now it was time for them to live with it. It took time for it to happen. Nothing ever changes. Not in homes like mine, where shame is disguised as pride and secrets are pushed under the rug. But after that night, everything did start to fall apart. I could have noticed that without being there. In the ensuing silence, I heard it. The sound of unseen communications reached my ears. I never returned the missed calls. When they realized they could no longer control me, panic struck. My uncle emailed me 2 weeks after the altercation. It was an email, not a call. The email was formal, courteous, and excessively worded, as if he were composing a letter of grievance to a hotel concierge. He expressed regret for the tension that had arisen. Perhaps he said the words in a rush. Despite the miscommunication, the family remained united. I didn't answer. Therefore, there was no miscommunication. They hadn't made a mistake under pressure. The last blow, the will, the birthday, the revelation wasn't a mistake. They had purposefully kept me out for years. It was an accurate representation of their true feelings for me. Then my brother's message arrived. There is only a single line. Thank you for disturbing Mom's tranquility. I looked at it for a while. No salutations. Don't apologize. Simply assign blame. Ego alone. I didn't respond and erased it. I received a letter from the family's financial advisor the same week. It seems that my withdrawal from the shared legacy trust that my grandmother had established caused my mother to reorganize her accounts. Grandma knew, therefore, it turned out that my name was on the trust first. She was aware of their character. She was aware that one day I would require a parachute, and at last I was putting it to use. I refrained from boasting. I didn't even feel like I had won. I had a sense of emptiness. I didn't feel damaged in any way. It felt akin to a fresh start. I felt as though I had finally let go of a bulky backpack that I had been carrying for so long, that I had forgotten what it was like to walk pain-free. I began to get up earlier. I began to actually keep a journal. My journal was filled with deep, unvarnished inquiries, not simply sweet diary ideas. When no one is attempting to mold me into their ideal, who am I? What am I looking for? When love isn't dependent on approval, how does it feel? It was difficult on certain days. I would see old photo albums and feel a twinge of pain. Perhaps if you had tried harder, it reads. Then I would recall that I had. No one should ever have to try as hard as I had. I was so hunched over that I almost broke. And I had stopped doing that. I am not here for a mom who thought I was a bother. I was not there for a brother who equated love with inheritance. I did not work for a household that only honored me when I was silent, helpful, or unnoticeable. I began going to therapy. Melissa was my therapist, and she made no effort to help me. She didn't express her feelings to me, she simply listened. She heard me, and I did for the first time. With my hands clasped around a mug of peppermint tea, I sat across from her one afternoon and uttered, I feel bad for not returning. I regret not exerting more effort to improve the situation. Do you think they ever tried to fix things with you? She questioned, nodding. I hadn't heard anything so loud in years as that quiet. I came to the realization that I had been lamenting the prospect of having a family rather than its actuality. I also met someone at that time. I met a man named Caleb. He worked at the bookshop I started to frequent, which quickly became my new sanctuary. His eyes were pleasant and didn't constantly search for flaws. He genuinely waited for the replies to the questions he posed. He was unaware of my past, not immediately, and he didn't feel sorry for me when I told him. All he said was, it must have been difficult. You're still here, though. Strength is that. The amount of time we spent together increased. Initially, there were no significant changes. It was simply a time of calm companionship, coffee, and walks. However, during those times, I started to understand what true connection looked like, something that didn't require sacrifice or silence in return for love. My family, meanwhile, kept becoming worse. After everything, I learned from another cousin that my mother's standing in her community had suffered. The repercussions, the birthday event, and the will had all been discovered. And judgment began to spread along with the truth. People started to inquire, why would a mother subject her daughter to such humiliation? What caused her daughter to suddenly become distant? Why did the quietest, most faithful one vanish so quickly? And as the mask came off, they panicked, just like everyone else who is only kind when they are being watched. They made an effort to connect. Initially, my aunt expressed her longing for the past. Then my mom texted me saying, please don't make this arrangement permanent. However, the damage had already occurred. I didn't answer. I didn't answer out of malice. However, I mention this for the sake of clarity. For once in my life, I wasn't the one pursuing love. Instead, I was going for peace. The exact time of the shift is unknown to me. Perhaps it was when I stopped looking at my phone every 5 minutes in the hopes of receiving an apology that would never materialize. Or perhaps it was the first time I woke up without feeling like I had a burden on my chest. A steadily quiet lightness began to creep in. Freedom does not come with a lot of hoopla. At times, it simply enters and sits next to you. I didn't require retribution. I didn't need retribution in the way that others might perceive it. I would rather not witness their pleading. They had injured me, and I would rather not do the same to them. Distance was what I needed, what I wanted. I found myself in space, untainted by their criticism. I thus created a life based on the ashes of the one they attempted to govern. I relocated to a little seaside hamlet where no one knew my last name after leaving the city. I had been dreaming of opening a modest art studio for years, but people constantly told me it was a waste of time. Contrary to what I was told, it wasn't a waste of time. People arrived. They arrived not only for the artwork, but also for the tranquility of the place. They arrived grieving and departed with an artwork. Perhaps they brought with them a little more hope. I discovered a sense of belonging. It was through kindness, not blood. Without expecting anything in return, my neighbors left fruit baskets. Every Thursday, I have a spot reserved at the Poetry Circle thanks to a neighborhood librarian. Caleb stayed too. He made no effort to shape or correct me. He only stood by my side while I regained my faith. The soreness continued to creep in on some days. For instance, I once observed a mother and daughter giggling in a coffee shop. Even when my family forgot their birthday cakes, I remembered the birthday cakes I used to make for them. However, those times no longer dragged me down. They simply went by. They were like waves that rolled back to sea after brushing against me. Months later, I got a letter in the mail one day. I recognized the handwriting, but there was no return address. My mom's. Paper felt lighter than the envelope. It carried the weight of years. I'm sorry. Alternatively, there could be a higher level of authority involved. I opened it after hesitating. There was a brief, rigid, and ambiguous note within. It didn't apologize. It stated, "You need to have expressed your feelings to us." We could have prevented all of this drama. I folded it once. I then folded it once more. Then, without thinking, I tossed it in the garbage, since I had informed them. Perhaps I wasn't able to express it in words. However, I had made every effort to be kind, helpful, and submissive. At every silent moment, I choose to keep my mouth shut instead of yelling. I made it a point to celebrate every birthday, even the ones that others might have forgotten. I had made my presence known to them. I had repeatedly shown them who I was. Something gentler, more potent came to an end. With me, it was over. Selecting myself. I cherish each and every day. I still occasionally hear about them, from web rumors or distant relatives. After a few blunders, my brother's business apparently didn't go so well. As my mother's health deteriorates, nobody is hurrying to be by her side. I don't gloat, though. I'm too busy living my life. I am too busy painting. I am too busy recovering. I now realize that family isn't necessarily based on blood. Occasionally, it's the individuals who arrive at inopportune times. Those who pay attention without passing judgment are often the ones who stand out. Those who don't ask you to prove your worth are worthless. And perhaps that is the greatest kind of retaliation. Not yelling, "I am not banging doors," but evolving into a person who doesn't require their consent. Turning into a person who leaves without turning around. Therefore, if you've ever been informed that you're not as talented as in your home, if you've ever felt like a shadow, if someone attempted to use their limited affection to determine your value, allow me to state this. You're not invisible. You're not damaged. It is not for others to define you. All right, you may leave, to recover, to become. Additionally, you are free to choose peace without feeling guilty. This is the essence of true freedom.